Minister of Pakistan may have changed, but the chant remains the same. The newly minted PM Shahid Khaqan Abbasi has stuck to the old tune in his first foreign policy directives, ordering continued diplomatic and political support for what Pakistan calls the freedom struggle in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. Abbasi also called for continued focus on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or CPEC and a strengthened emphasis on economic diplomacy. The directives were issued at the first briefing he received on foreign policy by the Foreign Secretary Temina Janjua. The newly appointed Foreign Minister Khwaja Asif was also in attendance. The briefing seemed to indicate Abbasi's intention to give attention to foreign affairs despite the many domestic issues the country is currently facing. On the Kashmir issue, the Prime Minister's office said, and I quote, Prime Minister reiterated Pakistan's resolve to extend moral, political and diplomatic support to the just struggle of people of Kashmir for their right of self-determination. He directed continued projection of grave human rights violations by Indian occupied forces, end quote. However, despite mentions on Kashmir, CPEC and economic diplomacy, the PMO statement made no mention of Pakistan's relationship with the United States, something that has seen a bit of a downturn in the recent months. Pakistan is expected to be affected by the US's policy on Afghanistan, which is currently under review, and the debate of much disquiet in the United States. This is the big story we're tracking for you right now, because the new Pakistani Prime Minister has stuck to the same old tune when it comes to Pakistan's approach to the Indian state of Kashmir. Shahid Abbasi has said in his first foreign policy directives that Pakistan will continue diplomatic and political support for what the country calls the freedom struggle in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. He's also called for a continued focus on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor CPEC and, of course, a strengthened emphasis on economic diplomacy. All this took place at the first briefing that the new PM received on foreign policy by the Foreign Secretary Temina Janjua. Senior journalist Mateen Haider joins us on the phone line from Islamabad. Good afternoon, Mateen. Thanks for speaking with us. Are you surprised that it was that foreign policy that's come up for conversation pretty much amongst the first things that the PM is looking at, keeping the domestic issues of Pakistan in mind? Mr. Haider, if you can hear me, I was just asking, has this foreign policy directive come as a bit of a surprise, or was it expected that the Prime Minister would speak first up on foreign policy directives and not anything else? All right, we'll get to Mr. Haider in just a bit. I'm also joined on the phone line by strategic affairs expert Mr. S.D. Muni. He's joining in from Delhi. Good afternoon, Mr. Muni. Thanks for speaking with us. Are you surprised by the Prime Minister's statement on Jammu and Kashmir, or is this expected when it comes to Pakistan?
I think this was expected. There's nothing new in it. And moreover, this is Mr. Nawaz Sharif's line. So his successor should, and particularly his party's leader, should say what the line has been.
All right. There's also mention of the CPEC and, of course, renewed commitment to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. In fact, the new Prime Minister, one of the first meetings he held was with the Chinese ambassador to Islamabad. Some sort of veiled signals perhaps to India in that meeting as well?
No, I think this again, Pakistan's commitment to CPEC is very strong. And Pakistan is heavily now dependent upon China. So both Pakistan-China relationship and the CPEC project are a part of Pakistan's foreign policy perspective, and one should not expect them to deviate only because Mr. Nawaz Sharif is not there. So again, this is not surprising. There is nothing new. I don't think any message specifically is meant for India, but it is certainly meant for China to say that we should continue with our cooperation and with our friendship. This would incidentally also not rattle anybody internally. and army is happy with this line, Kashmir, CPEC, China. So I think this is I would consider this as a routine, normal, expected statement.
All right, so sticking to the same old tune in many ways, but there wasn't any mention of the United States, Mr. Muni, in that foreign policy directive by the new Pakistani Prime Minister. Does that indicate that all's not well, as is being reported by many media outlets, between the United States and Pakistan?
Well, everything is not well in relation to United States and Pakistan, and you don't need any great research to find out. So, why should Pakistan's Prime Minister, new Prime Minister, in his very first statement, say things which are unpalatable, which are unpleasant in relation to any of the countries, particularly to big power? China, as I said again, repeated, that they have a special relationship with China. China has a special focus, attention and stakes in Pakistan. So they have just reiterated what the policy line is. If somebody were to ask them, how is your relationship with the US, they would have said, oh, very friendly, very cooperative. But there is nothing more to highlight there.
Right. Sir, also, if I can just ask you, this was one of the first briefings that the new Pakistani Prime Minister received from the ministries. That, in addition to the fact that Pakistan has, for the first time in a long, long time, a foreign affairs minister in Khwaja Asif. Do you think that this indicates that there is going to be a renewed interest toward Pakistan's foreign policy objectives under the new Pakistani Prime Minister?
No, this is Pakistan's foreign policy line coming from Mr. Nawaz Sharif. And this new Prime Minister is a nominee of Mr. Nawaz Sharif. More than that, this Pakistan foreign policy line has a very broad national consensus. So whether the ministries are reiterating what they have been doing or not is not of great significance. The simple matter is that they have reiterated their one of the very important foreign policy planks. Kashmir is one of them and China is another one.
All right, so the face may have changed, but the rhetoric remains the same. Perhaps the source even continues to be the same, despite Mr. Sharif's removal from the post. We leave it at that, Mr. S.D. Muni. Thanks very much for joining us here on the broadcast on WION.